Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And okay, we are just a minute past. But you have to send a reminder to your friends, to everyone that you know that needs to be on board so that we can start early. And good evening, sir. Guest speaker for tonight is here. Imagine, he even got it before most of us. Good evening, Honorable Anthony General, sir.
Good evening. How are you? Thank you
Fine,
for
thank
having
you, sir. And
me.
yes, sir, it's a great privilege to have you here tonight. Sir, please, we'll like to take some permission to wait for a few more minutes so that we can have more people on board. So we can start. See you in another
Okay,
5 minutes. Okay, sir.
that's fine.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, sir. Okay, we are live on YouTube. Oh, Okay, we have 2 more minutes to go. Good evening for those just joining us, and we sincerely apologize that we've not started. We're trying to wait a few more minutes for people to join us so that we can have more people on board. That's why we already have our guest speaker here, and I'm excited to have you. We have 12 people here. Well, please send the link to your friends, to your colleagues, all those that you think should be here so that we can start on time. We don't have much time to waste. And I say good evening to you once again. And I'm excited to be here. My name is Ayo Tomiwa, and I'm privileged to be the convener of this series, and I'll be the hostess for tonight. Though subsequently, you see some of my team members on board as well. So it's not just about me alone. And then the series has been tagged Moving Beyond Gender Limitations, Breaking the Silence Culture. And coincidentally, it's the season of the 16 days of activism, where we speak out, we strategize, we mobilize, we advocate. We do all we can to speak out against all forms of gender-based violence across the world. It's not just a Nigerian thing, it's across the world. Well, we call it Orange the World. Yes, you can see my orange outfit already. It's in solidarity to the season. So we orange the world just to create an impression and to send a signal to a message kind of. Okay, over time, women are leading change in small ways that matter the society, the world. And you will agree with me that women development is national and global development. But these developments can be trampled upon when their rights, when they are subjected to all forms of gender-based violence. And that is why tonight we'll be looking at the legal framework. Like we've been doing on the series, we've been having different topics that ranges from addressing trauma, how to create a conducive environment for the girl child education, as well as other things, other topics, and we still have so many topics all lined up as well. We'll be looking at the mental health, how SGBV affects the mental health of the girl and women in the society, because it's only a healthy state of mind that can be productive. So we're looking at this moving forward. As well, we'll be looking at women in leadership. Yes, we have different topics all lined up, but tonight we're looking at the legal framework beyond just doing, okay, we have bills, we have laws. Ekiti State just passed, Ekiti State reenacted the GBV law in 2019. There's a VAP Act, and there's so many laws in place in Nigeria. How effective are these laws? How empowered, how strengthening are these laws? Are they really strengthening the institution? Are they really obeying the laws? That is what we'll be looking at. And trust me, I could have gotten just anybody to speak to this, but we had to go and beg our Attorney General, who happens to be the chairman of the Southwest Attorney General's Forum as well, because he's our Oga. Yes, I know despite his busy schedule, we have to bring him out to speak to this, because he has been at the forefront of enacting these laws, pushing for it, and is more of the behind the scenes person anyway. But he has been there, he has been working on this. That's why we had to bring him on board. Please, if you're not too busy where you are, please welcome Mr. Olawale Fakunda, the Honorable Attorney General, Ekiti State, and is the Commissioner for Justice, Ekiti State. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for.
Okay.
Good yes, evening, I'm here. Sir. Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, I guess we have to hit the ground running because we have so many things to talk about tonight. And for our participants, we're actually streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube as well. The link to the YouTube channel is there in the chat box, and you can drop your comments, your contributions, your questions, anything you have right away. If you have, as it comes, you can just drop it. So we collect and we ask the questions. So, sir, let me begin by saying thank you for coming once again. What is the present prosecution rate of perpetrators of SGBV? Let's begin with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I guess that is a normal question. We have the laws across the country. Recall that the governors of the 36 states of the Federation recently realized how serious this matter is, that of domestic and sexual violence, and declared a state of emergency. Since that declaration of a state of emergency, there have been a raft of laws. So there is no limitation of political will. I guess where we need to do more collectively is the area of enforcement and awareness. And I guess the enforcement is around the prosecution. Now, I always struggle to explain to people that the Constitution provides rights to fair hearing for everyone. Even in particular, those who have come in conflict with the law, who have committed grievous crimes. And I know it's always a hard one to explain, but yes, the right to fair trial is a crucial component of our Constitution. All the guarantees that the Constitution provides for somebody who comes in conflict with the law is also available to sex offenders. So there's a sense that the process is slow. There's always a sense that particularly those that are caught in the act, people say there's no need to go through the gamut of the court. Let's just quickly take them from where they are to prison. It doesn't happen that way. So yes, we have prosecution is always ongoing, and it's ongoing across the country. But regrettably, prosecution of sex offenders have to follow the process of our criminal justice system, which is arrest. The prosecution, you have a lawyer. The prosecution will have a lawyer. The sex offender will require a lawyer, and it goes. You require witnesses. So the process can go on and on. So that's where we are. There's a willingness to prosecute, but as it is, and I think that's what we suffer from across the 36 states of the Federation. Sex offenders must also go through the long and sometimes slow process of our criminal justice system. So that's where we are.
Okay, well, the willingness, that's a major thing. And then you talked about enforcement and awareness. Okay, well, I guess we'll still come back to these points. These are very, very crucial in the fight against the SGBV we're talking about. Okay, so I'll use Ekiti State as a case study. We have so many laws. We have bills, even like I mentioned earlier, at the national level, the VAP Act and so many other laws. So we'll come back to that to talk about it. But we have this thing still ravaging in our society these days, where we talk about victims still getting blamed for whatever happens to them. Is there a law to prohibit this? I don't know, maybe you understand. Like, okay, the victims get the blame instead of the perpetrators. Are there any laws in place to protect them from this?
Yes, absolutely, and that's why Ekiti State is unique. One of the limitations, if you like, that we discovered, certainly in the last, since Governor Faimi became governor in his first time, is that the justice system seems to pay more attention to the offender and little attention to the victim. It's not an Ekiti thing, it's the way, unfortunately, our laws have been presented. So what we have tried to do is to embark on a holistic reform of our criminal laws that recognizes first and foremost that victims are an important part of the criminal justice system. It's that recognition that is now at the heart of our criminal justice system in Ekiti State. So we've gone about this in 2 weeks. First, we've published a victims charter. The purpose of the victims charter is essentially to assure victims that they have rights, including the basic one, right, including such basic rights as not to suffer from double jeopardy. Once an offender is arrested, the Ministry of Justice is committed to taking the victim through the process, informing the victim about how we intend to go about the prosecution, informing the victim about the day that the matters will come up in court, and where necessary, also getting the victim to come and give evidence in court. Note also that in Ekiti State, we have a sexual assault referral center. So we don't simply just get the victim to come to court. There is provision for a whole range of psychological, medical, and if you like, support system that is available to victims of gender-based violence broadly, if you like. So we have the support system, we have the administrative framework, and what we have done now is also to put that this victim protection framework in our criminal law. We have just undertaken a radical reform of the Ekiti State criminal law that places also victims at the heart of that legislation. So we have a raft of interventions. We have administrative, we have provision for medical and psychological support, and we have the legal intervention.
All right, thank you so much. So you talked about different laws there and the interventions that are put in place to help the victims or survivors, as the case may be, from the sexual assault referral centers to laws protecting the survivors. How effective, how empowered are these centers? Are there professional services there, or is it just a one-on-one thing? Like people we tend to believe more in things that are professional, that seems a bit more professional. How professionals are these services?
Well, we have the Sexual Assault Referral Center. It's an initiative of the first wife of the governor of Ekiti State. Again, the idea is to provide high level, professional, effective, immediate, and compassionate service to survivors of gender-based violence. Of course, like with everything, it's always we can do a lot more. The present support that is available at the center makes use of a variety of expertise, medical doctors, gynecologists, psychologists, even there's a legal component of the institution. So yes, it's available. What we need to do, and it's something we go back constantly, is the need to do more awareness about this. And thankfully, that is already happening on its own. When people go to the center, when they see the services that the center offers, they themselves go out and talk about the importance and the good services that the center provides. But as I said, can we do a lot more awareness? Absolutely. It will also be good to have the center in many more parts of the state. Presently, we have it just in Ado-Ekiti, and I think the plan is to have it across the 16 local governments of Ekiti State.
Okay, so since we have the sexual assault referral center in town, and okay, like I remember the last time we had a session like this, we had Barrister Rita on board, which I'm sure she's the coordinator of the State Sexual Assault Referral Center. She said we have 32 sexual assault referral centers in Nigeria. That's still way below the line because we have 36 states already. So that's like we're still far away from what we need to achieve. So let's go to the art of reporting SGBV. Most times you hear that cases are being thrown out because it lacks effectiveness or lack of evidence, or for the legal terms. Well, I'm not a legal person, so I'm just trying to use the legal terms. Their cases are being thrown out or the case is dead on arrival. What do survivors need to know? What needs to be put in place when reporting SGBV? And how can they go about it? What evidences do they need to have on ground to report cases of SGBV? That's like two questions in one. Can I take it one after the other, sir?
Okay, the first is to know that there is help, that you don't have to accept it. I think that is the first important barrier that always have to be crossed. Regrettably, we live in a society where the immediate tendency is always to look at the victim, particularly if it's a female victim, and say, yes, you must be at fault. So the first important barrier is the mental one, the ability to say, look, I'm not going to accept this. Something has happened to me, and I'm going to complain. That may look very trivial, but really that is where we drop the ball constantly. Because if you look at the number of complaints that we get, coupled with the ones we eventually take to court, you see that there's a wide gap. It's very easy for people to say, this happened to me, but when you now say, let us take it forward, we need to apprehend the offender, even in those cases where we apprehend the offender. Somewhere down the line, either the victim or the family of people say, we really don't want to proceed with this matter again. So that is a fundamental issue that we have to continuously deal with. And we are trying to deal with it in a number of ways by ensuring that, as much information and support is provided to the victim, to give the victim the confidence to be able to go through with the complaint, because in the Ministry of Justice we have to act on the complaint. If there is no complaint, if there is no willingness to take forward the complaint, we will not be able to proceed with effective prosecution. So that is on one hand. Now, the moment we are able to secure the willingness of the victim to complain, then it goes easy from then on. Presently, we realize that sometimes the victim comes under enormous pressure from families of both the victim's family and the offender's family, which is why I issued an advisory warning such persons that they are interfering with the victim. In our view, will amount to obstruction of justice, and we will take immediate steps to respond to that. This is what the wife of the governor has called rape and beg. In Ekiti State, we do not accept rape and beg. So, that process is also there. But ultimately, if you ask me, we can put all the measures in place. We can give all the comfort that we like. If the victim is not willing or prepared to go forward, there's really nothing. We can do about it. In terms of preparedness, yes, we always say report immediately. Report immediately before either the body or the evidence is tampered with. In many cases that we have seen, you see that people takes maybe 4, 5, sometimes a week before the victim will now come forward. By then, the evidence is washed away. And there's probably very little the prosecution can do, but probably to now want to act on either circumstantial evidence or evidence that will not be as effective as when the victim has reported from the beginning. So the advice is always, if it happens, report immediately. In Abeokuta, for example, there's a police clinic. Even if you don't have access to the police clinic, any other clinic that you are able to report to will help our job. We need a solid medical report to enable us take forward the prosecution. That is the core. Without a solid medical report, we will struggle to achieve effective prosecution.
All right, thank you, sir. Well, in case you're just joining us, we have on board the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice State, who is talking to us tonight about extracting the legal framework in curbing SGBV. That is speaking from the legal angle, because we need to know how to report and what needs to be put in place. He has talked about some of the things that are actually like impediments in the fight against SGBV. One of it is enforcement. Despite the laws we have at different levels, the national, the states, we have different levels all in place. But unfortunately, enforcement is a major thing. Then awareness and lack of willingness. Also, he talked about the victim protection law being put in place already, so as to prevent stigmatization and what have you. And now, part of the advice is when things like this happens, report immediately. And it's actually, in case you just joined, that's actually what he was talking about before you joined us. Okay, so sir, we have the Ekiti State started this Mayman last year, where the sexual offenders register, if I get that right, is being opened, and then the rapists are being named and shamed. How effective is this? Won't this just make people go underground? How effective in curbing SGBV, especially the rape part? And then, okay, let me take it one after the. I actually have a couple of questions surrounding that. One of it is is to talk about how effective it is as it helps in curbing SGBV. And the other one is, can this be extended to just not just beyond rape? Because that one was specifically for rape, the name and shame thing. Maybe, okay, let's take it one after the other so we don't mix it up.
Okay, thank you. The idea of sex offenders register is essentially to document such offenses and the offender, particularly for the purpose of a repeat offense. Now, when I became Attorney General, it occurred to me quickly that we had a large number, or rather an unacceptable high number of repeat offenders, particularly when you talk about issues of armed robbery, sex offenders, and the like. And the reason that we have that is because documentation, criminal documentation, keeping criminal records across the criminal justice agencies is really weak. And for us, for prosecutors, once you have a repeat offender, there is a more than average probability that you are able to sustain a favorable outcome in terms of prosecution. So the idea of having a sex offenders register is essentially to document the crime and to document the offender, so that we know that this person is a sex offender. So even if the person goes through the court process and a conviction is secured, in case you have an issue of a repeat offender, a repeat of the offense, then we are able to bring this to the knowledge of the court to now achieve further effective prosecution. How effective it is? Well, the jury is still out there. The idea is to name and shame. In sex offenders, in sex offenses, do we have the level of shame that will require persons to not want to commit that offense? I'm not able to give an answer to that. It will take, really sitting down and looking at the numbers. But what I believe we have done effectively is to show that, in Ekiti State, if you rape or if you defile, the moment we secure a conviction from the competent court, we are going to put your details on all social platforms. And we have gone social media platforms, and we have gone ahead of that, from that. For example, the sex offenders league, they do not benefit from Mr. Governor's powers of period of mercy. So that, if you are convicted, we will make sure that you spend the time that you have been sentenced in prison. You are not entitled to either a reduction or a commutation of your sentence. So these are the measures we are put in place to back up our name and shame policy in the hope that it will work.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. So the other part of it is, okay, the name and shame thing was started as rapists, the perpetrators. So can this be extended to other arms of SGBV? That's those who beat, batter their wives, their spouses, the widows' rights thing, those involved in it, and other arms of SGBV generally. Can this thing, can it be extended to it? Is it to extend it to such?
The issue of domestic violence is a little bit tricky, which for me is a matter of concern. It's a major issue. What we try to do the moment a matter is reported to the Office of the Attorney General is to seek to invite the perpetrator. And where the perpetrator is unwilling to or refuses our invitation, we then take the next step of inviting the police. But you find in particular in Ekiti State, I don't know the experience in other states, many of the victims who are often wives will hesitate to take such matters forward. What we hear most times that is the father of my children, he's the breadwinner of the house. So we get this pushback constantly, but I cannot remember any matter of domestic violence that we have pursued without the wife coming to us at some point in time to say, well, the point has been made. Might now be nice to drop the matter, the man has repented, and things like that. So cultural issues certainly affect how we proceed with this case. So a wife that is not willing to take forward such matter certainly will not be in the frame of mind want us to name and shame the husband. But it is work in progress. Given the seriousness of it now, given the fact that we have to constantly deal with this issue on a daily basis, we are always reviewing and revisiting our systems and processes to see how better we can position ourselves to deal with these issues in addition to achieving prosecution.
All right. So thank you. So my next question will be the timeliness. We talked about how to go about the reporting earlier, where you told us, okay, we need to document and then report immediately. At least that was the key word that's my take home from what you said, report immediately. But in a situation where I'll use a particular scenario or a case that went viral recently, I think that was like 2 years ago, where a lady came out to accuse a pastor of raping her. That was like 20-something years ago. And everybody was like, why is she just speaking up now? Why is she just talking at this point? Is there a time frame to when anybody can speak up to seek justice for any act that anything that has been done to the person in the past? Like this lady came out like 20 years after. There are cases that takes more like 20-something or more than 10 years. Is there a time frame to report and get prosecution for SGBV related cases?
Well, generally speaking, time does not run out of crime. There is no limitation for criminal matters, particularly of this sort. What then happens is that, and as we saw in that particular case, sustaining prosecution then becomes a lot more difficult. but it doesn't have to be so. People say, if it happened to me last year, it happened to me. As long as you can identify the perpetrator, as long as there is reasonable, you have reasonable, I will evaluate this, we'll evaluate the reasonableness of the evidence that has been presented to us. We will take the matter forward, but as I said, if it happens immediately and you report immediately, there's a likelihood that, such our intervention can then be sustained. If it's a long time before now, it makes it a lot more difficult, but we are not in the business of pushing victims away. What is important to us in the Ministry of Justice is the believability of the story and the ability to provide what we call reasonable evidence in support of the allegation, as it were. Once it happens, we will report it to the police. We will work with the police to see that the matter is properly investigated. And once we have a fair level of investigation that gives us a chance to sustain the prosecution, we'll go with it.
Okay, I think the network just went. Okay. All right, sir. You went up for a few seconds. You can go on, sir. Honorable Attorney General, sir.
Yes, I was saying that time does not run out against criminal prosecution. When a victim, in our case, if a victim comes to us, even if it happened a while back, what is important is the believability of the story. The moment it comes to us and we get a sense that there's something to work with in terms of what was said to us, we'll invite the police, we'll work with the police around the investigation. And once we have a police report that says there's a likelihood that this really happened, we will go with it. So we are not in the business of immediately pushing away victims to say, well, it happened many years ago, let's just forget it and move on. We don't do that.
Okay. Hello, sir. I think the network again. Oh.
Yes, I'm sorry, the network is going on, but I can hear you. It seems to be fluctuating.
Okay. Okay, so in prosecution, in the case where it involves a minor, yes, a minor who can speak up for herself, and according to the law, a minor is somebody who is under the age of 18, according to the Constitution. In case it has to do with a minor and then the family, like you mentioned earlier, that most times the family will come and say, we are not interested in prosecuting this person again, we're taking this case out, and the like. Is the state or the law enforcement agencies empowered enough to go ahead with the prosecution of such case, even when the family of the survivor decide like, okay, I'm not going on with this? Are they empowered to go on with the case?
I think what is first important is that sexual violence is not a private matter. I think people need to know that, and we struggle to explain to our people on a daily basis. Sexual violence in any form, gender-based violence, is a criminal matter, and it's not a matter between two private parties that need to be resolved by means of civil conversation. It's a criminal matter. Mm-hmm. And that means that, the offense is against the state. So yes, individuals are involved, but at the appropriate time, the institution that is responsible for taking that forward is the state. So constantly, we always struggle to make that clear. What you have most times is parties writing and saying, well, this happened, but we have now reconciled. We don't want to go forward with this matter again. Given the directives that have been issued by my office recently, that constitutes obstruction of justice. It's not something we tolerate. In any case, with respect to minors, we've enacted the compulsory treatment of child victims of sexual violence law. That law essentially provides medical opportunity to treat minors quickly. And without prejudice to whether such minor can afford the cost of medical treatment or not. So once we have that, legislation is imposed, and the moment it gets to the police clinic, we get to know. Thankfully, we have a very good relationship with police and the clinics in the state. We also have very good relationship with a number of medical facilities across the state. So the moment that is reported to them and is reported to us, we get to know. In my office, I have a special advisor on gender matters whose mandate essentially is to deal with these issues. And so, 24 hours we are there, we get to know. And the moment we get to know, we take it forward. We have several cases involving minors that we are prosecuting presently. And what we do is we put ourselves as the guardian of the minor. So for us, it's without prejudice or irrespective of what the parents or the guardians of the minor want. The moment we find that there is a prima facie evidence that the child has been violated or assaulted, we put ourselves as the guardian of the minor, and we take immediate steps to protect that minor, including removing the child from the place of abuse, but in a manner that ensures that the life of the child is not disrupted, including going to school and things like that. We have a safe house, safe space that we put minors. So with access to medical, therapeutic, and what other facilities that are there. So it's not. I think what is important to stress is that sexual violence matters. It's not a private matter. The state is a crime against the state, and the state always, takes, in respect of minor, immediately takes the place of the guardian or parents of the minor, as the case may be.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the enlightenment so far. Like, there are so many things that I am just getting to know as well, even as an advocate. And I'm sure those on the participants, our audience as well, they are picking one or two things. And don't forget that you can actually, if you have questions, you can drop it to the chat box, or you raise your hand so we can ask questions from our Honorable Attorney General. So before I let you go, because I have some questions all lined up here before we take questions from the floor from our participants. Given the definition of SGBV according to UNHCR, it includes physical, sexual, and psychological violence. We're talking about the sexual part mostly and the part of the physical part. Now, the emotional part is the most important, and these are things that it takes a while to get over, to heal. Yes, the physical, maybe there's a wound on the body, it can be treated and then it's good. But the psychological and the emotional part is the most important. Is there a way to identify this? Not necessarily, okay, this person beat me up, or I was sexually assaulted by my guardian, or by somebody on the street, or by some men on the street. Are there ways to identify emotional and psychological violence as well?
Well, as you'll appreciate, that is a little bit difficult to achieve. But again, the purpose of the Sexual Assault Referral Center is to exactly respond to such instances that you have said. Yes, we recognize that the physical is one thing, but it's the emotional trauma aspect going forward that is a major, sometimes outlasts even the physical, and the mental, sometimes mental challenges that come across with going through such a traumatic experience. So that is why we have the Sexual Assault Referral Center that it has been constituted in such a way that it includes experts in all these areas. So for us, it's not simply about responding to the physical. It's also about enabling opportunities for the survivor to have access to mental therapy, if you like. So that is where we are with that.
Okay. So is there a synergy between the Ministry of Justice, the Sexual Assault Referral Centers, and maybe institutions, counseling units, or counseling organizations that help address this? Not just because, like you rightly said, the Sexual Assault Referral Center is in advocacy. and we have 16 local governments in Ekiti State. Somebody from Ayetoro or Ochun at the extreme, or somebody from Omo Ekiti, or somebody from either Aramoko, or even Efun, for as the case may be. These are places that are far away from Ado. Are there structures in place to work with are they authorized to work on behalf or act on behalf of the sexual assault referral centers? Is there a synergy or a network?
Yeah, of course, there is. We recognize, government recognizes that we can't do this alone. Essentially, dealing with the issue of such magnitude we have seen will require a constructive relationship with civil society organizations. So clearly, we welcome partnerships. Government, we can also not be everywhere. You find that many of the complaints that we receive across the 16 local governments are from non-governmental institutions. Of course, we are strengthening our local government structures to make them more accessible and aware of these issues, to be able to work with us to take this forward. Ministry of Justice, we've established a constructive relationship with our local government chairpersons. They are aware, they are sensitive to this issue. And so, even where it happens, where such act happens outside Ado-Ekiti, we get to know. What is also important to stress is that the Commissioner for Police, the President Commissioner for Police also is very clued in on these issues. Any rape matter must be dealt with in Ado. He doesn't believe in settling matters of sexual violence across the counter. So that is also very important to at least the police stations across the state are aware that once matters of this nature, it's not something that you can just push aside or to attempt to settle. So we have that. But what is more, in my view, what we have done well is the ability to engage vibrant civil society sector in the state, not only in terms of awareness, but in terms of also giving us the expertise that sometimes we don't have. And that we have found extremely useful. Presently, I've been speaking to a non-governmental organization to deal with, because we realize that in many cases, many of the victims will want a specialized kind of intervention. Somebody to just talk to them. Many people, particularly domestic violence issues, that a number of people just simply want somebody to confide in, somebody to talk to. So we're identifying key counselors across the state to respond to the needs of such victims. So across board, it's about collaboration. Yes, we have useful collaboration. We have useful collaboration with the police. We have useful collaboration with CSOs, and we are always, willing and able to work with CSOs, because ultimately, if all these interventions will be sustained, in a couple of months now, the final administration will come to an end. For us, what will take it forward is to have first the culture enabled and established, as well as having CSOs that are able to take it forward. So whether we're in government or not, we'll have the ability to continue. And that for us is what is really important.
All right. So I'm going to ask about, we need to talk about the role of the media in reporting SGBV related cases or in creating awareness. You see most cases when, because I know one of the things that surrounds SGBV is why people seem not to come out to talk is the fear of the stigmatization, because I don't want my identity to be known. I don't want to be stigmatized on the street as the girl who was raped, as the girl who, or as the woman who reported her husband, and the husband was maybe prosecuted or warned, or any language you want to call it now, because of the stigmatization. So what is the relationship like between the media and the Ministry of Justice, and let me use the Sexual Assault Referral Center, because this has to do with protecting survivors of SGBV. What is the synergy here between the media and these bodies?
Well, thank you for that. Certainly, we realize the important role of the media in awareness, you cannot, it's simply priceless. You cannot overestimate the very important place of the media, not only in communicating these issues, but also ensuring that people know that there are consequences for such acts. Can we do a lot more with the media? Absolutely. Sometimes I have discovered that probably a lot more, some level of capacity building is required in terms of enabling appropriate reporting of such. So it's not simply about this man raped or this man violated this minor. It would be good to have an in-depth report that also goes beyond, the raped this person. So we keep working on it. Thankfully, certainly in the state, we have a vibrant media. We have a media that is willing to learn. We have a media that is willing to engage. We are now looking at our various strengths and weaknesses. So going forward, I'm certain that by the time my tenure comes to an end, we'll have a media, some media level, some media awareness that will even sustain, that will go beyond our administration. So far, yes, we know media has an important role. We are working together with the media, but I'm convinced, I said, ultimately, we will have the level of media intervention that's required to ensure that these issues become broadly acknowledged.
All right. Okay. So there's a question in the chat box from Temitayo Olupopola. She says, or he or she says, is there any punishment earmarked for those aiming to cover up the atrocity of child rape or molestation? And I think I should tag that to the obstruction of justice that you mentioned earlier. Is there any punishment earmarked for those?
Absolutely. And we have tried to warn people twice by two the number of interventions. First, you recall that I said that I published an public advisory that seeks to warn people, number one, about interrupting our investigation, including talking to the victim or the survivor in this case and trying to get them not to cooperate with us. We've warned them that if that happens, that in our laws will be obstruction of justice. We have reviewed our criminal law now to specifically focus on such kind of offenses. So yes, there's provision in our law for obstruction of justice, and such persons are liable to certain term imprisonment.
Okay, well, I hope you got your answer, Temitayo Olupopola, for that question. Okay, so initially when we started this session, you talked about the willingness, enforcement, and awareness. So I'll go back to the enforcement and the willingness now. The willingness on the part of stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, and then enforcement. How can we boost the willingness of relevant stakeholders in this fight against SGBV at both the state, the regional, and the national level? How do we boost the willingness? Because we really need to do this.
I think what is important is to know that sexual or gender-based violence diminishes us all. It's not just about the victim. The moment, and I say this at every opportunity I get, non-reporting simply diminishes us all. If you have, and that's why we have seen, if you ask me, one of the reasons why we have such unacceptable levels of gender-based violence, including particularly sexual violence in our state, I'm talking about the state specifically, is that there's the tragic tendency to look away. And that then perpetuates the culture. It makes it feel as, well, it's okay. It's not okay. So we have that issue. Again, what we need to do is to do a lot more. Thankfully, the wife of the governor leads by example. She has been visible in terms of ensuring that people are aware. There's political will at the highest level. Mr. Governor, at every opportunity, has also been very visible on this issue. So there is sufficient awareness to let our people know that we simply need to speak up and speak out. So, do we have the critical mass now of people speaking up and speaking out? Well, it could be better. It could be a lot better.
All right. So how do we enforce these laws? We have laws, the reenacted SGBV law in Ekiti State. We have the anti-FGM law. We have the widows' right law, and so many laws like that, both at the national, the state level, and then the regional level. How do we effectively enforce these laws?
Well, for us, enforcement is multi-pronged. First, people need to be aware. What we have done in Ekiti State is to try to translate those laws into Yoruba. That process is ongoing. I think we have achieved some level of translation with respect to those laws. The second thing is to ensure that people even know about these laws. So we've begun the process of gazetting these laws in a manner that will make it available to as many people as possible. So, once we cover the element of understanding the laws, once we cover the bit about seeing the laws, knowing that the laws exist, is then left to us to achieve enforcement of those laws. There is no, as I told you, as I said earlier, there's no shortage of political will to achieve effective enforcement. But, we continue to require the support of all concerned, the victim in particular. We have simplified the reporting process. We have simplified access to us. I also know that in Ekiti now, because of concerns that the Ministry of Justice is sometimes not accessible, we are due to where we are located and the protocols that is required to come into the office. We have established a citizens complaint center in Ojaoba Market that will give immediate response to complaints, including complaints of this nature. So, however you look at it, we are taking steps to achieve the level of enforcement that is required to deal with such serious.
All right, thank you so much, sir. We really have to wrap up the session because I know you had a long day and we need to wrap it up. But the recording of this session will be on our Facebook page, Initiative for Human Development. So in case you're just joining, you can join us. You can go to the page and follow up and listen again to the session. The recording will be there. So a summary and take home for me for this session is that no time frame for prosecution of SGBV. No time frame. So as long as you think you have the evidence and you have what it takes to prosecute this, come forward, speak out. And that's the major thing we need. The assurance that, okay, I can and then talk about this when I really need to. But it's not just that doesn't mean we should delay the process. If it's something you can talk about immediately, please talk about it immediately. Make your report, make it formal. Then there are centers all around where you can report. There's the professional and the relevant help you need to get. So everyone is a stakeholder. I'm trying to give a recap of the session for those who are joining. And then the major thing is SGBV is not a private matter. I think we really need to hammer more on this. So let our people know this more. It is not a private matter. It's not a thing of, Ebimini. It's about my family and whatever happened is none of anybody's business. No, SGBV is not a private matter. It is a criminal matter. So once it gets out, it is a criminal matter that should be prosecuted. Then SGBV diminishes us all, not just the victims. So why protect the victims and everyone around us? Speak out when necessary. There are perpetrators all around us. We see these things, we hear these things. We should speak up as much as we can. Well, thank you so much, sir, for your time. We cannot thank you enough because we thank you, sir. We really appreciate you. And we hope if we call you again, you'll be ready to come on board.
Thank you very much.
Oliver.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
And let me appreciate everyone for joining us tonight. And next week, by Sunday, we'll be having another session again, another talk on another topic. We'll circulate the information as well. Thank you, and do have a wonderful night's rest.